tell me about the oils that you keep in your kitchen and why, how you chose them and why you have more than one oil.
At Lighthouse, we have a huge variety of olive oils. They're used from anywhere for marinades, to ingredients in different dishes, to finishing oils. We confit in oil. We also use it for infusions. So it's a really huge variety of different oils depending on their harvesting time, to their pungency, to how we're going to use them. It's exciting. It's part of the many ingredients that we have.
Can you get specific about why you have, what kind of uses you put these oils to when you use the milder ones, when you use the more pungent ones?
Olive oil has so many different qualities and so many different ways of using it, from a very mild, maybe a late harvest olive oil that you can use in a sauce where you want it to have very little flavoring influence, to using it as something that you're finishing a dish that really gives it spice and greenness and is really used as a flavoring agent, depending on the temperature that you were going to use it for. So it really has so much variation in how it can be used, and we want to make sure that we are using it in the right way and that it really shines through the cooking. And especially in a Mediterranean cuisine, that olive oil is so prevalent. And my brother definitely knows a lot about the history of all these ingredients and how they grew together. So he can talk a little bit about that as well.
Yes, I can. In some of the dishes that we make here at Lighthouse, the olive oil, as we know, helps human body digest certain nutrients from different plants. Let's say in hummus, as an example, chickpeas and olives were cultivated around the same area, Syria and Turkey, or the border of which these countries today lay. Back then, of course, thousands of years ago, we didn't have border, it was just a region. And that's where chickpeas and olives were first cultivated. And they, by trial and error, I guess, over thousands of years ago, they realized that they work really well together. The olive oil helps the human body digest and absorb certain nutrients, definitely with chickpeas and other legumes as well. So when we use olive oil, let's say for hummus, we choose the one that goes most well with that in terms of flavor, in terms of mouthfeel. We don't want to have a greasy palate when we eat a creamy, kind of like flavorful dip. And then depends on what we add to the dish. Let's say if we add garlic to it, then we'll have maybe a more pungent olive oil to come through just as much as the garlic does. So there's flavor, there's mouthfeel, there's strength of flavor as well.
And wellness.
And wellness, of course.
So good for you.
Yeah.
I noticed on your homepage that you have all these lovely meze that are kind of in pools of olive oil. And it made me think that, Americans use olive oil. We're such misers with olive oil. We think of it as something you just put in the skillet for sauteing just a little bit, as little as you can use, or we maybe put a few drops on a dish at the end. But I get the impression that you use it more lavishly. So can you talk a little bit about that Eastern Mediterranean approach to using olive oil?
Part of the mission statement at Lighthouse is to feed as many people as possible food that is good for them. So we absolutely aim to create a menu that is extremely healthy and diverse and delicious and colorful and supports local farms. And olive oil, the way that we grew up and in our cuisine, is just such a prevalent flavor and ingredient, and it really is part of the dish. I mean, it changes everything. It gives it this depth and mouthfeel, like my brother mentioned, and all of these really layers of flavor. And for a finishing oil specifically, it really is used as something to enhance the dish. So it gives it this glistening, greenish kind of beautiful color, and it transformed the dish from being something very delicious to something that has so much complexity and layers of flavor and beauty. And we're just enjoy spreading it. And again, it goes back to the, makes the food also much more bioavailable, and it helps us digest it. So use it lavishly. You can, and it's healthy for you and good for you. Unlike maybe some other oils that were more popular in the 80s, olive oil is really something that you can consume a lot without, with very little or no sort of harm to it. A cup, maybe apart from like calorie consumption, that is something someone should be aware of.
Now you mentioned Mediterranean and Eastern Mediterranean cuisine or diet. This is a cuisine that has changed and still changes over time. The Mediterranean diet, or what we'd see on an average table 500 years ago, is very different than 200 years ago, 100 years ago, and today. With the discovery of America, the Middle East and the Mediterranean were introduced to tomatoes and peppers. Things were not here before. So the Mediterranean diet 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago is very different than today. And also, I would say we're still evolving. Just like my sister said, what we had in the 80s and what we have now, we sort of having a second renaissance of olive oil in America and in the Middle East and the Mediterranean as well. We are finding new ways to work with olive oil. We're finding new dishes. We're inventing new dishes. Things that were not available even 20 years ago are now becoming more apparent and more ubiquitous all over. Let's say our TVs, our Instagram, anywhere you look, you see new ways to work with old ingredients, and olive oil is an integral part of it. It really helps make those ingredients and techniques shine today like it happened before.
Could you give some specific examples from your own menu of how olive oil, a certain type of olive oil, makes a dish really come together, or elevates a dish?
I don't want to go back to the hummus, but I have to, because this is very proud of the way we make hummus at Lighthouse. I've been playing with different techniques of making hummus. As I'm sure a lot of people know, it's just like in Italy, where 50 kilometers over there, they use the metric system. From village to village, they'll make the exact same dish, but it will look different, and it will taste completely different, and it would be completely different, even though it's the same Italian dish. Same thing goes for hummus in Syria, Lebanon, and different parts of Israel as well as Egypt and Jordan. So if I have hummus in Tel Aviv, it will be very taste and look and feel very different than the one in Jerusalem. And even within Jerusalem, different neighborhoods and areas have a different way to make hummus. And when we make hummus here, certain styles of making hummus will call for a different olive oil to either express certain things or contrast certain other things. So that's how we use it differently, even in Lighthouse with certain dishes. So let's say I'm making the Yafo Tel Aviv style hummus, which is a lot more creamy, tahini forward, and very delicate in terms of the amount of garlic and other things that I use. And I can really have a very light and bright olive oil versus, let's say, an East Jerusalem hummus, which is much strong flavor. They use a lot more garlic and a lot more lemon. And then I'll have to use a more robust, fruity, dark green, dark flavor olive oil. And then this way I can play with different olive oils. And it really, we tasted some a few days ago. With and without it, it's a complete different dish. So the olive oil really is a flavor in the dish itself.
And also, in general, I would say our menu is very vegetable forward. About 70% of the menu is vegetarian, 30% of it is completely plant-based. So olive oil is one kind of like a really beautiful, fresh fat that we use to flavor everything. In a zucchini dish that we currently have on the menu, we use a very light, not really pesto, not really salsa, and we're using a fairly light tasting olive oil, or like a very fruity, delicate olive oil, but then the finishing touch for the dish over a shaved aged feta is a really robust one. So in the same dish, you would have two olive oils, and the pesto you want it to kind of taste very mild and a little bit sweet, and then the finishing olive oil kind of gives it a nice little kick and that spicy olive oil tastiness.
You mentioned that you're a plant-forward kitchen. Do you feel like olive oil helps you in plant-forward kitchens, that olive oil helps you deliver more flavor, deliver more satisfaction when you're working without or with not very much meat or animal protein?
When we use a lot of vegetables, and we do, and we use different techniques, roasting, grilling, just slicing, chopping, etc. Something funny someone said at the CIA when we were there, that people don't like vegetables, and Europeans also, they don't necessarily like vegetable. They just eat it, and they like it more with olive oil. It's very true. The olive oil really helps. You don't like to eat vegetables, broccoli or wherever. Broccoli has a very bad name. I personally like it, but the different types of olive oil and the use of olive oil really changes the flavor and the texture and the way the vegetable comes to be introduced to the customers, to whoever eats them. So, without a doubt, in a plant-forward kitchen, plant-forward dishes, olive oil it's an integral part of any type of technique we use with vegetables.
What about with seafood? Does that, when you're doing seafood preparations, does that steer you towards a certain type of oil, or can you point to a dish on your menu where you've got like the fish with just the perfect oil for it?
Our fish or our seafood selection also changes seasonally, and so depending on what is in season around us at the time, we'll definitely via trial and error or just over time knowing different fishes and what they'll work with. If we're using something like Spanish mackerel that is so abundant in flavor and really robust, we'll definitely use something, a spicy, robust olive oil with it versus maybe a milder fish like tuna or mahi, and we'll use something a little bit more delicate and fruity. So there's definitely, that definitely comes into place. Right now we have swordfish skewers, and they come with an avocado schug, and that's paired with a very spicy olive oil and garlic, and it's just an explosion of flavors.
And also the finish, we have a ceviche made of tuna, and so we finish just on top with a tiny drizzle of olive oil that's very bright, so it brightens up the dish. It's very light and gives it just a nice little hint of fruitiness on top of the ceviche flavors. Yeah, we use it. Yeah, it goes really well. Not surprisingly, with all kind of seafood. We eat shrimp, fish, even in the mussels.
Yeah,
There's a finishing touch. Olive oil really just gives the dish like a bright new.
We're not shy in our olive oil use.
You mentioned sort of the seasonality of fish, but what about seasonality with produce? Does that tend to take you in different directions with olive oil? Do you tend to use a different style of olive oil in the spring than you do in the fall or in the winter?
Winter vegetables tend to be a little bit higher in sugar, a little bit more dense in flavors. So we'll definitely use a more robust olive oil. We also are always tasting olive oils, different producers, different seasons, everything changes. So we are always tasting with it and pairing it as we go along. We do it with our kitchen staff. We make dishes and try them with different olive oils, and really kind of that's part of the process. Our staff really loves tasting olive oil. They'll come in and they'll say, oh, there's an olive oil tasting, and there's all these little plates, and we're all kind of deciding which one is our favorite and pairing it to the right dish. So it's definitely something we do often with both the seasons of the vegetable, the produce, the fish, and also the olive oil itself.
Yeah, I think today, especially after the pandemic, where everybody was cooking at home for a very long time, it's. I think people found a lot of joy in cooking and trying recipes. And one of the things that I really enjoy is going over a dish with my cooks or my front of the house staff and tasting it with different olive oils and see which one we like best and vote on which olive oil will go with each dish. So it goes without saying that when vegetables change, we change our menu, and so we change our olive oil selection with it.
Whether it's Italian or Spanish or sometimes from Israel or Chile, like they're all changing, and we want to make sure that we're on top of those seasons as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know that a lot of your customers, a lot of my friends don't think they like a really pungent, aggressive, bitter olive oil. How can we make these oils more acceptable, more approachable to people?
The pungent oil is essentially are the healthier ones, right? The folic acid is more present, and they're actually better for you. And in ancient time, I think they judged it by how many coughs, and the more coughs you had from the olive oil, the better it was for you, the better olive oil it was. So I think, first of all, in today's world where people care so much about wellness and their bodies and maintaining our youth, I think that is one definitely positive. And the other thing is truly pairing it with food that it works well with. If it becomes a part of the dish. I mean, no, I don't know a lot of people that eat straight up mustard from the jar, but if you're using it as an ingredient, even a very spicy one can be great company to other things. So, I mean, very spicy, very pungent olive oil is not meant to sort of be doing shots and drinking it straight off the bottle, but on a really delicious tomato salad with some smoked salt and basil complemented by other things, it could be absolutely delicious. A little bit of vinegar to maybe make it a little bit more palatable if the spice disturbs you. So it's, how do you incorporate it in the cooking? Making an olive oil cake where there's so many other ingredients and the sugar might take away from the olive oil, but using a pungent one, the olive oil can actually come through in a really beautiful way. So it's about creating these combination and tasting it and not being afraid to try it, and maybe say, okay, maybe just even use a little bit less, but knowing that it's so good for you and knowing to pair it properly, I think that's the way to go.
My sister touched on a good point. How often do you just sit and sip on olive oil? If you're not even if you are a professional, it's not something you do regularly. Just like we taste vinegar or we taste wine, same thing goes for the olive oil. So for pungent olive oils, I would say it's our job to introduce it to people in such a way, and maybe even on the cooking shows, instead of just saying some olive oil, describe what olive oil it is. And this is something I just thought of when my sister was talking. How, if you cook with red wine, you never mention what red wine you're using, or if you're using olive oil, let's just say olive oil, hot olive oil, whatever. So it's time to get into the conversation. What olive oil we're using, where's it from, what are these characteristics? Just like with mustard, we talk about Dijon mustard for certain things and the yellow mustard for others. The same should go for olive oil as well.
I just have two more questions. One is about sustainability, because I know that's important to you. And I wonder if you feel like olive oil helps run a more sustainable kitchen, in the sense perhaps that it makes it easier to be planned forward. Do you see any link between use of olive oil and a more sustainable kitchen?
I mean, I would say the link between sustainability and olive oil might not be obvious, but it does represent a history and a type of dining and a priority that I think promotes that. If you're using a lot of olive oil, you're probably not a steakhouse necessarily, right? If you care about the packaging of the olive oil or where it's coming from and how it's made and whether it's extra virgin or not. So I think your values tend to be ones that are the same or in the direction of sustainability. It's probably not entirely a coincidence that we have a very sustainable restaurant and that olive oil is a part of it, but I don't think that there is like an absolute obvious link to it. But people who care about what they're eating, about their well-being, about other people's well-being, about cooking healthy and eating a lot of vegetables, like they all tie into the same thing. And I think olive oil is just part of that equation in a way.
We're working with sustainable or sustainability in mind, we try to keep as local as possible. And we have to make compromises like anything else in life. And olive oil, it will be one of the compromises because it is mostly it's shipped from Europe or from other countries around the world, right? If it, be it Italy, Greece, Chile, South America, anywhere else, France, Spain. So that is the one compromise we're willing to make and offset. We fairly much, everything is local at Lighthouse. Vegetables, seafood is always around here. We work with farms upstate for our meat, et cetera, and olive oil is one of the concessions we have to make. So,
but also
we're
not
happy
a
with it.
processed product.
Yeah, that's
not,
also
not an
true.
industrial, not
Yeah.
a processed product. So there's everything in sustainability is on a continuum, and I think
Yeah.
this, in the realm of oils, olive oil is actually the most sustainable choice that we can have.
And one of the aspects of sustainability is to sustain your guests, to give them nutritional food that's good for them, healthy and tasty, and it's definitely a part of that part of sustainability. We try to do what we think is best for our customers.
And lastly, I'd like to ask you to imagine that you're having some friends over for dinner, maybe in your home, maybe at the restaurant, and they're all vegetarian. Can you walk us through a menu that you might make that would show the use of different styles of olive oil?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really need to imagine feeding my friends. It happens all the time, especially at the restaurant. And I think one of the best ways to start a meal at Lighthouse is with a house-made sourdough and all of the different mezes, which each and every one of them incorporates olive oil. The hummus does, the smoked labna that we make in-house, the eggplant and pepper salad currently, the carrot ivar. So they all have olive oil in them as an ingredient, and definitely the kind of like more pungent one that we've been talking about as a finishing touch, and like that like first bite of spice and glistening bite. We would probably move into currently a really delicious tomato salad that has some whipped feta and basil salsa, heirloom tomatoes, and then it's finished with a pretty mild and fruity olive oil and some sesame seeds and sunflower seeds for crunch. We have the roasted or grilled zucchini and summer squash with pesto and aged feta cheese, and finished with a very pungent, strong olive oil to complement the grilled flavor of the zucchini. When you grill vegetables, you get this like bitter, delicious grilled flavor that to me always is reminiscent of meat. And so grilling vegetables, we would usually use a very strong olive oil to complement the grilled flavor. We have a grilled escarole dish with tahini on the bottom and a very heavy drizzle of delicious olive oil on the top, and kind of like that green ring on the outside. I think between all those dishes, they'd be happy and content.
And I think also that we'd be able to taste the different olive oils on each dish. And when people pay attention, and a lot of them do, they note these different olive oils and how they're different, which is always fun and nice to hear.
You can see either it's either a yellow ring or like a green ring around things. It really is so vibrant and beautiful.